Welcome to another episode of Take Up Space. And in the studio today, we have Sajl Salim, who's another therapist, and we're going to talk about psychedelics today. So I'm super excited, and we're going to talk about her work within that space. So welcome.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
My name is Sajl. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an LPC associate.
Yeah.
I've had my license since January of last year, so it's been almost a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. About halfway through my hours.
And where are you working right now, Sajl?
I'm in Frisco, at New Perspective Counseling Services.
New Perspective, okay.
Yeah, I like it there. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I work primarily with queer, BIPOC, and neurodivergent folks.
Nice, okay.
Within that population, I'm especially working with a lot of folks who are dealing with complex trauma, PTSD, anxiety, a lot of hard stuff. But it's fun.
Fun? You enjoy the work?
I enjoy it a lot.
Do you have hard days? Because I definitely do, especially when we're talking about clients with complex trauma.
Yeah.
Like, it can get pretty heavy.
I honestly think for me, the hardest clients are minors, working with teens. I have a handful right now. But usually, even with the adults, I feel like if they're in therapy, they're there, they're paying for it, they want to change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They want to grow. So I feel like that always keeps me more optimistic as well, because they have a lot more control over their lives. But I think with teens is where it can get pretty tricky because they don't have nearly as much autonomy.
I actually see some clients from an organization that gives free therapy to teens for a little bit of time. But to your point, it's mandated. Yeah. So it's a little bit different than an adult walking through the door. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think that is a huge part of why it's so fun for me is that everybody that's there wants to be there. Okay. And they also want to be with me in particular. They specifically found me.
Because you specialize in the BIPOC and LGBTQ.
They specifically found me. They reached out to me in particular because of something that is on my bio or whatever. So I think that also makes it more fun.
Yes.
Because I guess my stuff is attracting the right people.
Right. So and you're attracting people that you want to work with, right?
Right.
So I met you at my first ever networking event, which we were just talking about before it started, but you don't remember. It was at a coffee shop.
And do you remember which one?
I think it was Summer Moon in Frisco.
Okay.
And I walked in and I had my business cards and I was like, I'm going to make therapy friends. Do you remember?
Yes, I do remember. I do remember. Yes.
Yeah. And I think at that time you didn't have a full caseload. But now, fast forward, a year, you're fully occupied.
I'm getting pretty close to the point where I have to start turning people away.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So the topic of psychedelics, which I'm super excited to talk to you about. Okay, to start us off, maybe kind of breaking down, I've seen some Netflix documentary. I can't even remember the name of it.
How to Change Your Mind?
How to Change Your Mind, yes. And it broke down the different types of psychedelics, but I think it'd be really cool if you could start with giving us a breakdown and just what they do for you, what they could do for you, and what has drawn you to the space so much so that Vikash was like, talk to Sajl about psychedelics.
Love Vikash.
Yeah.
So I guess when I think of psychedelics, the first couple of things that pop into my mind specifically the mental health space is LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, and MDMA, and then ketamine maybe also. There's more than that, but those are kind of the most well-known.
Yes.
Definitely the most researched.
Sure.
So LSD is a synthetic chemical. I think, oh my God, I don't remember the year that it was first synthesized, but it was actually by accident.
Oh, wow.
By a chemist named Albert Hoffman.
Okay.
He was trying to develop some new drug from a mold called ergot. I'm such a nerd about this.
No, I love it. This is good.
And he he was kind of okay, theoretically, according to chemistry, this chemical should exist, and he's a chemist, so he's making all these different things. And he actually synthesized this chemical and then just kind of didn't touch it because it didn't do the thing that he wanted it to do, right? And then I think it was 2 years later, he came back to that same research and he was kind of looking at some of the different things that he had synthesized, and he got a drop of LSD on his finger. And LSD can be absorbed through your skin.
Through the skin. So
it's a
he
liquid.
took LSD by accident.
For the first time ever. The first person to ever take LSD. It's actually called Bicycle Day. It's like a day that people memorialize because he later came out with like his story about, I think he wrote a book, like a memoir about that experience, but it's very, I think they talk about it in How to Change Your Mind on the LSD episode where
I think so, yeah.
He started tripping. He started tripping. He took like a really huge dose in comparison to like what someone might take recreationally or even therapeutically today. And like he started freaking out and, you know, tripping out. I think his friend at some point came to pick him up on a bicycle, and so he's like riding on a bicycle. He's from the Netherlands, so it's like this Dutch man riding on a bicycle through the Netherlands,
and just tripping
on
That's why
acid.
it's called Bicycle Day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tripping on acid for the first time, and he talks about like everything's warping around him, and it was so crazy. So LSD is like a very typical psychedelic, I think I would say. It creates hallucinogenic effects, typically last, I would say, probably between 8 to 12 hours. It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Definitely have to like dedicate a day for it, and then even like a day afterwards to recover, because I think it can be pretty exhausting, emotionally exhausting. You have like the visual hallucinations, you kind of like feel physical sensations more intensely. You hear and see things differently. Like all your senses are kind of altered in a way.
And is LSD used therapeutically?
Yes. Well, it is being researched.
It's being researched. Interesting.
The primary thing I think that happens with LSD in your brain is just that, I think this is the same with psilocybin mushrooms as well, that there's just more neurons connecting in different ways than typically you would.
Okay.
So you're just increasing the amount of connections that are happening in your brain. So like parts of your brain that might typically never form like neuron connections are forming connections.
During
the
LSD
trip.
and shrooms, you said.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's thought that that's why you think about things in new ways. You maybe have like an epiphany or a realization, or a lot of people have these like really big moments.
Yeah.
Because those two in particular just like make parts of your brain talk to each other that never would otherwise. I guess in my experience, I would say that LSD and shrooms are pretty similar.
Sure.
Some people probably disagree with that pretty strongly, but I think they're pretty similar in effect.
Okay.
I kind of see LSD as maybe a little bit more like in your mind, whereas shrooms are maybe a little bit more like in your body, if that makes sense. Like LSD maybe more cerebral, if that makes sense. Whereas mushrooms are maybe more physical, less like in your head. But I feel like even that distinction, at least in my like subjective experience, is pretty like, it's hard to draw a very sharp line of
between
like
the two.
Yeah.
And they're both used or researched, you said, therapeutically.
Yes.
Okay.
They are both used in research therapeutically, and psilocybin mushrooms, those are found naturally occurring on Earth. They grow. It's pretty similar effects to LSD. You get the visual hallucinations, also the neuron pathways, you know, that connecting in ways that typically wouldn't. All of your senses are altered in some kind of way, and that one is shorter. So with mushrooms, you're typically looking at maybe like 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
So it's much more condensed.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people characterize like the difference between LSD and mushrooms as like LSD is kind of like an intense experience, but like drawn out over an extended period of time. So there's a more defined like peak of intensity, and then it kind of like after the peak, you kind of just like go down and down and down until your trip is over.
Okay.
But with shrooms, since it's more condensed, a lot of people experience that as like way more intense. So they're kind of like the same thing, but one is extended over a long period of time and one is condensed.
Okay.
One thing I will say is like psychedelics can be pretty hard to explain to someone who's like never done them before.
Yeah.
Because it's just hard to put to words, like very hard to describe. So if anybody's listening or watching and they've done psychedelics before, they'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about.
Of course.
But somebody who maybe has never tried psychedelics before would be like, what are you talking about?
It's an abstract experience and description, right? And I think you're going to get to ketamine, but that one is the one I am familiar with because now in therapy, so this is beyond research, therapy, they offer ketamine assisted therapy. So you can like walk into these centers, right, and get either ketamine through IV or whichever way, and they say they use it for like treatment resistant depression and things like that. But it's pretty easy. I used a Journey Clinical. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but essentially what they do is like they assign you a nurse, and then you get kind of checked to see if your body and just where you're at is okay with ketamine, how much of a dose is acceptable. And then you get paired with a therapist, and it's in such a controlled setting. So I felt really safe. It was my first experience with psychedelics or ketamine in this way.
Yeah.
And it's basically like these 3 hours. So it depends on the dose, but in this case, 3 hours of where I take the ketamine. I'm sitting with my therapist, and we've been working on something for the last few sessions. And
is this like before the ketamine?
Before the ketamine comes into the picture.
Gotcha.
And we're basically just prepping ourselves. And then she always says, like, you can't guarantee, what's going to happen on this ketamine journey.
Yeah.
But we can try to set the intention is the word that, you're focused on XYZ. But to your point with ketamine too, it's all about when I went on those trips, like, it was three hours long, and I'd come out of it. And for the next 2 days, basically what I was told was that my brain was more open to building new neural networks and, to your point, like building those connections. So when it comes to like healing from trauma, we would do like therapeutic things in those 2 days. Like we would do EMDR in those 2 days so we could build new connections, right? Yeah. And so we would, she'd ask me to do things that I really want to hone in on, like healthy coping mechanisms, essentially, right? Like go do yoga, go to journal, go walk, because your brain is now going to learn that this, and this equals this, and this is like your new reality. So I did that like maybe 6 or 7 times, and I did see a big shift. And it is accessible to people, and I feel like people don't know that, and a lot of it wasn't like, there wasn't any preset criteria on the fact that you could do CAP. For me, it was like, I came to a point where therapy, well, obviously we both are in this space, right? So when we're in this space and we hear something new, it's like, I'm curious, like, what is that about? And if it's going to do something different than EMDR and IFS and talking, well, then why not? So I got curious and I tried it. But I think that the definition you said of the first two, LSD and psilocybin, is similar to ketamine in that the 2 days. The 2 days and that window of neuroplasticity and building new connections is what they told me that was doing. No, that's interesting. I was ketamine is the one that I know the least about. Okay. Just as far as like research and like how it works, like the mechanism of action goes, that's the one that I know the least about. I definitely know a lot about LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, and a couple of others that are like less well known or not as commonly researched. But so those are the 4 that you do know of. And MDMA you didn't describe. So is that different? Yes.
So it's actually like there's kind of a debate in the psychedelics community about whether MDMA is considered a psychedelic or not. Okay. Because it's quite different from LSD and psilocybin. Okay. It's if you're familiar with like ecstasy, MDMA is ecstasy. I think became pretty popular in like the 80s and 90s with rave culture. And there was a chemist who wrote a book called pCal, which is, it's like a really, the P stands for a really, really long word in chemistry that I don't know. But it's like that word that I know and love. And he just talks about drugs that are in this category of that term. Like that's what they're called. And he was like involved in the initial research around MDMA and its therapeutic use. He was also a chemist and a psychiatrist and like in kind of that community in the 80s and 90s. But MDMA is known as an enactogen. Okay. And the way that MDMA kind of works is you don't necessarily get the same experience of tripping. I think colloquially being on MDMA is known as rolling. And
what's the difference, like tripping versus rolling?
so MDMA is a much more like objectively euphoric experience. I think LSD and shrooms can be challenging at times. It can be somewhat uncomfortable at times. But I think
MDMA is like pure euphoria.
MDMA is like a pure euphoria.
Okay.
So
and I've heard of like research now that has studies with people doing both IFS therapy and MDMA together.
Yes. So the way that MDMA works is it releases a lot of oxytocin in your brain. And oxytocin,
feel good,
right,
hormone.
is that feel good, especially related to like connecting with other people, with relationships. I know that in past experiences when I've done MDMA, I felt very much like nothing bad in the world could ever happen to me. It's kind of like this feeling of everything in the world is good. I am good. The place that I'm in is good.
I'm safe.
I'm
never in any danger. Yeah. Everyone loves everyone.
Everybody loves everyone. It's
what a good feeling.
It's such a delusional like positivity.
Yeah.
It's much more short term compared to LSD and shrooms. It's like pretty consistently about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay. Does it have the same concept of neuroplasticity?
No.
Okay.
So the way that MDMA, well, I guess I shouldn't say no because I don't know for sure.
Sure.
But what I do know is that kind of the mechanism of action for MDMA, specifically with PTSD, is when you're on MDMA, when you're rolling, because you feel so safe, because you feel so good about yourself and the world.
Yeah.
It's way easier to process traumatic memories because
that makes sense.
They're not nearly as triggering or overwhelming as it would be otherwise.
Yeah, because with trauma, like your brain centers, like amygdala, would think that a fear that was happening then is happening now. So therefore, you're always living in a constant, like, I'm unsafe, threatful environment. So what you're saying is, like, if in that moment we could introduce this substance that makes you feel the love and safety in all things, it helps you process.
Way more accessible. Yeah,
that's so cool.
And I will like say that I've never like officially done psychedelics in like a how you've done
setting.
like in a clinic.
Yeah.
But I have recreationally done LSD, psilocybin, MDMA in a safe environment for me, with the intention to process difficult things that I've been through.
Gotcha. And that was my question. So, like, what drew you to this space of psychedelics?
Yeah. So I actually had, like, no interest in ever doing psychedelics for most of my life. Up until this point, I'm 26. But it was actually, I have an older cousin. Who really got into rave culture. Honestly, I owe her. I owe her because it was, I think, my sophomore year in college. I had just gone through a really, really difficult time in my life. I was honestly like still in the middle of a pretty bad depressive episode. And I was always very close with my cousin. So I would call her every day. I would talk to her every day. At that point in time, she was kind of like the only friend that I really had.
Yeah.
And I was kind of I FaceTimed her one day and I was telling her about, how I haven't been feeling great. Like my motivation is decreasing. My interest in life is decreasing. And she was like, I know what we're going to do.
I know what you need.
She was like, I know what you need. And I was kind of like, okay, whatever. And so she actually is the one who introduced me to psychedelics for the first time.
Which one was it that you tried? Or if you don't mind sharing.
No. Yeah. It's funny to look back on because I think with what I know now, like I'm very informed on harm reduction and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I think looking back, we were extremely irresponsible and very unsafe.
Yeah.
And I don't hold that against my cousin because I don't think that she really knew some of the best ways to be safe and harm reduction, stuff like that. And it's honestly like a stroke of luck that I had amazing experiences and nothing bad happened to me because I think I would never recommend anybody to try psychedelics for the first time in the way that I did.
Okay.
But I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. She had just kind of told me, like, this is going to help you. And she was my best friend. Like, I trusted her with my life. We grew up together. So I was like, you're not introducing me to anything that's going to harm me, right?
Yeah.
Like, I trust you. And we went to a music festival together.
Okay.
And that was where I tried LSD, shrooms, and MDMA 3 days in a row for the first time.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yes.
And just to be clear, you're saying highly not recommended.
Do not do this. Do not do this.
Do not try this at home.
Don't do that.
Okay.
It's a horrible idea.
So you got into it because you were in this phase of your life and someone you knew close to you introduced you to it.
Yes.
And it sounds like you got lucky and had an amazing experience, right? So I'm curious, like what in now, like that you have this relationship with psychedelics, what has been, well, because what we hear a lot about is like, you access higher levels of consciousness and you heal and you know, there's like pivotal moments in these trips or rolling or whatever. How would you describe like a pivotal moment for you in these experiences and that shift in whether it's ego death or higher consciousness? Like what would you say has stuck with you a moment in one of your
so I think
trips?
I think the first one that I tried was MDMA.
Okay.
And I remember, again, like at that time, I was very depressed. I didn't really have a lot that I was excited about. I was losing my motivation in life. And I guess I didn't really realize it until I was rolling. But I had kind of accepted, for some reason, that I was just never going to be happy. Like, I was incapable of being happy. I had just kind of, you know, when you're depressed and you think, like, all kinds of stuff that doesn't make any sense at all. It's
relate.
Like, not logical, doesn't make any sense, you know? But, like, I definitely was at that point in my life where I was like, this is how it's going to be forever. I'm just never going to get to experience, like, joy or happiness.
Yes.
So I rolled for the first time, and I was like, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that I could experience that at all just like blew my mind. I was like, I can experience happiness. Yeah. Like my physical body is capable of experiencing joy. And I think I remember when I rolled for the first time, I had that feeling of like, I'm amazing. My cousin is amazing. Her friends are amazing. This festival is amazing. Whatever DJ was playing, I don't even know or remember. Amazing, right, like the show, the music. I was like, this is the best thing ever. This is the best place ever. This is the best day ever. Just like, you know, on top of the world. And I kind of like, I mentally, if this makes any sense, I mentally like took a screenshot of that feeling, that moment, right? Like in my brain, I was like, I need to remember what this feels like because I don't want this to be something I feel only when I take this drug. I want to feel this when I'm not on this drug, or like I want to channel this feeling when I'm not on this drug. I want to take this with me. I want to carry this with me. And this is all happening like internally, you know, like I was at a music festival, so I was dancing and, you know, having a good time. But in my head, I was thinking like, I need to remember this. I need to remember what I'm thinking about right now. And I need to remember why I'm thinking about it. Like, why do I think I'm so amazing? Why do I think everything is great? And I remember like, you know, I was dancing, having fun. And so many people at the festival would just come up to me and be like, I love your energy. Like, you look like you're having such a good time, and I love that, and it makes me want to have a good time. And I think that happened to me, like, that night, within the span of 3 hours, like, 10 different times. Like, multiple people coming up to me and just being like, you're having an amazing time, and I love that, you know? And so I remembered that. You know what I mean? Like, I remembered that I was just being me in that moment. It felt like I was just unfiltered, uncensored, experiencing joy as I felt it in the moment. And people came up to me that I never met. I didn't even know who they were. And they were just like, I love you. I love that you're having fun. I love that you're so happy. And I was like, I want to remember that. You know,
I love that.
People just said that to me for no reason.
Yeah, you wanted to capture that feeling because it sounds like you were missing that in the depressive state you were in. And I resonate with that. Like with ketamine, I think, you know, when I got off the trip, like, I didn't realize, even after all this education in therapy, how our bodies are like constantly go, 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 go. So when I first finished the first trip of ketamine, I kid you not, it felt like the world slowed down. Like I was so slow, and I described it as slow and slow. And then now I think if I look back, I would describe it as like really present. Yeah. So present. Yeah. Like I'm here and I'm all here with you. I'm not thinking about the future and I'm not worried about the past. Like I'm truly present. And that feeling is like priceless, you know? So I resonate that I wanted to also capture that moment and hopefully have it without the substance. And I think that's what brings me to this like duality on these psychedelics. Cause on one hand, it's like, I wholeheartedly believe we don't need anything external to feel the deepest levels of love, compassion, and acceptance and forgiveness and unity and all the things in union. And at the same time, I'm like, man, the world and trauma and experiences that block that and forgive me, like fuck you up in that way.
Yeah.
You lose the ability to connect to those inherent human qualities that then I sit here and I'm like, you know what? If it takes some ketamine to come back to who you really are, then it takes some ketamine, you know, and therefore I feel like I got a lot of value out of it too.
Yeah.
But it's a tough truth to sit with.
It is.
You know, that we need to deconstruct in that way what is already within us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It is. Yeah. I think that's a conversation I have with clients every single day.
Yeah.
Of like, this is hard.
Yeah.
I think at this point in my life, I'm so grateful that I've come to a place of, I feel like true peace and contentment.
Yeah.
And like it's honestly unbelievable because there was a point in my life where I was so neurotic, like so anxious, like I said, extremely depressed, right? Like I had experienced a lot of trauma and I just thought I'm never going to be happy in my life.
Yeah.
And now I'm at a point where I wake up in the morning and I have like no anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm just like, here I am.
That's amazing.
I'm ready.
And you're contributing that to the psychedelics.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in that vein, how do you see psychedelics fitting into therapy today? I know we talked a little bit about the research that's happening. And is there certain types of things that people are struggling with? Like depression is your example, right? Like, are there certain types of issues that work better with psychedelics and you would recommend versus not?
Yeah. So I think with LSD and psilocybin, I know there's been a lot of research done on people who are diagnosed with terminal illness. Like there's no cure.
Yes.
Like this is going to kill you.
Yes.
Right. And LSD and psilocybin have been shown to really, really help people in accepting death and accepting their diagnosis of this terminal illness.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect that I know has been shown in research is pretty consistent. I do think like when it comes to LSD and psilocybin in particular, they can present very challenging experiences. They can cause anxiety.
Do you mean like challenging because you're revisiting maybe trauma?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't say necessarily because you're revisiting trauma.
Okay.
I would say that just the state of tripping on LSD or psilocybin can be uncomfortable.
Gotcha. Because you're disoriented from reality.
It can be unpleasant at times.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the way I kind of think about it is that you can get caught in these loops of thinking where you kind of feel trapped a little bit or stuck.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to feel like anxious or fear or even like paranoia. Like those kinds of things can be fed into a little bit by LSD.
Like intensified.
Yeah, LSD and psilocybin. And so I think that's why with those two in particular, and even with MDMA, I think for a different reason, the psychedelic community has a saying of like set and setting. And I think both of those are crucial for LSD and psilocybin. Being with someone, if you're with people, like people that you trust with your life.
Yeah.
You know, that you trust will be there for you no matter what, how hard it might get for you. Because it can get scary or it can get intense. And so you want somebody there who's not going to be like, oh my God, why are you freaking out? You know, like you want someone who's going to be understanding or try to help you.
That's why I used a therapist. I was like, this is the most controlled setting possible.
Yeah. So I think with LSD and psilocybin, definitely anything that comes from a very like fixed mindset.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I said with my depression.
Yeah.
I felt like this is just how it's going to be forever.
So you mean like core beliefs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fixed beliefs.
Yeah.
That you
Or just
really
like
want
a fixed mindset that like things are not going to change or that it's not possible for me to change or
absolutes, things
right,
like that.
Like I am bad. Just, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, so what you're really talking about are beliefs that are wired, right?
Yeah.
And so to establish a new one or to establish a new connection.
Right. I think LSD and psilocybin can be really good for that because your brain connects in new ways that maybe it wasn't otherwise, right?
Yeah.
While you're even in the trip.
Yeah.
And so if you have that intention of questioning those beliefs, I think it becomes a lot easier to question them when you're in that state because you just think about things that you wouldn't think about when you're not tripping. With MDMA, I definitely think that PTSD seems to be the one that responds the best based on
which
research.
You mentioned, right.
And I think it makes sense based on kind of the mechanism of action, how it works. I think LSD and psilocybin have a pretty low rate of addiction. It's pretty.
I was just gonna ask, like, how addictive can these substances be?
It's pretty rare for people to take LSD and psilocybin and become addicted to them.
What about MDMA and
MDMA
ketamine?
definitely has an addictive potential.
Okay.
And it is also, this is why I care a lot about harm reduction. MDMA is also a drug that it is possible to overdose on. And a lot of times, especially if you're taking recreationally, MDMA is a stimulant in the same category as like Adderall, methamphetamine, those kinds of things, as a very similar chemical structure. And so a lot of times, like if you don't test the things that you're buying, you're taking meth and you don't know. And meth is extremely addictive.
Right.
MDMA is not nearly as addictive, but it does have addictive potential and it can be neurotoxic at certain dosages. I mean, I think I advise caution around all psychedelics.
All of them, yeah.
Do your research, be with people that you trust. Because I have so much experience, I oftentimes, like, my friends are interested in trying it. I'm like, please tell me when you're going to do it and I will be there because I know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You can be that safe.
I can help you. And I feel pretty confident in that.
It's really just any time where you have a fixed mindset and you want to be able to build new connections and bridge new thoughts and beliefs, right? And then MDMA specifically, PTSD.
Yeah.
And I know ketamine, when I tried it, it was sold to me as more focused on treatment-resistant depression.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty...
But it has a similar neuroplasticity and
I think that's pretty consistent with the research that I've read about ketamine is like they show the highest success rates with chronic suicidality, treatment-resistant depression. I think even like alcoholism, there's been some research there.
That's right. Yeah.
I think LSD and psilocybin are pretty much some of the, like, chemically speaking, the safest drugs that you can take.
Okay.
Like, you will never do any harm to your body just from taking LSD, no matter how much you take. Like, there's no lethal dose of LSD or shrooms. I mean, shrooms, you might get like a stomach ache just from eating a lot of shrooms, but like, there's no point where you can overdose on LSD or shrooms.
That's good to know.
You'll just trip really hard.
Yeah.
The more you take, you trip harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
But eventually you stop tripping and then it's over.
Okay.
So MDMA and psilocybin are relatively safe in that regard, but I think they can be uncomfortable. They can be challenging. Ego-death experiences can be pretty terrifying as well. So there's definitely caution advised there. Sometimes when you're tripping, you might do things that you wouldn't otherwise do as well.
Yeah.
So you want to be sure that there's somebody with you who is able to rein you in. Like if you have an impulse to do something, you want to go outside, you want to, whatever it might be.
You want to make sure you're in a safe environment with safe people, right?
Right.
And I think, so what's interesting is that you're South Asian and we go to those networking events, but and you're talking about psychedelics so freely. So I'm curious what, concerns or maybe like ways that it's misunderstood in our community would you want to speak on? Because I feel like in our community, it's just not as highly supported to go that route.
I mean,
with a lot of things
is not even supported.
Exactly.
Right.
So
psychedelics is a whole other can of worms. I feel like in the South Asian community, there isn't even such a thing as psychedelics. They're just called drugs, right?
Yeah.
And drugs are illegal, so they're bad.
Yeah.
That's
so there's a lack of education.
Right. Typically, in my experience, the logic is just like, oh, these are against the law. So that means that if you do it, you're a criminal, and that's bad.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of end of the conversation.
End of the conversation.
There's no further investigation into that at all.
Gotcha.
But I mean, laws can be bad, you know?
Yeah. Do you see any clients that are South Asian specifically?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So it is still, it's being explored, but maybe like as a community, it's frowned upon.
Yeah. I mean, in my work professionally as a therapist, I don't do psychedelic therapy because it's not legal in Texas or in the United States to practice like at all.
Well, unless it's like what I did, which is ketamine-assisted therapy.
I think ketamine is the only one
it's legal,
that's legal right now.
Controlled substance and legal to do with therapy.
Yeah. But LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA are not legal. But yeah, I just think there's so many things in our community that it's like that, you know? It's like, this is what it is, and that's the end of the conversation. Yeah. And there's no further investigation. There's no room for nuance. It's just, this is bad, so we don't do it.
Yeah. And do you feel like there are any ethical concerns around psychedelics outside of, you talked a lot about safety, and I get that, and harm reduction. Are there any other ethical concerns you think we should be like wary of? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, this is also related to safety, but with MDMA, I mean, you give a person something that makes them feel like everybody around them is safe and everything in their environment is safe. That's pretty dangerous in the wrong environment.
Because it's not true.
Yeah, because it's not true. Right, exactly.
To be real.
Yeah, it's not true.
Yeah.
So that one in particular, like, you want to be in a controlled environment. You want to be around people who you trust with your life. Like, you will not question people's intentions. You will not question why things are happening. Like, you'll just be like,
you'll just go with anything, which could be very risky.
This is great. Everything's great. Yeah, it can be very risky. I do also think, I know less about this, so I won't like say too much because I don't know as much, but I do know that as the potential of psychedelics in mental health is becoming more of a hot topic, capitalism is doing its thing, you know? And I feel that, you know, if it is legalized in my lifetime, it's definitely going to be very financially inaccessible. And I see that as an ethical concern.
Sure,
because I think the people who need it the most probably won't have access to it.
Yeah. And you're speaking about the other three specifically.
Yeah. So I think there's that kind of ethical issue of access. I mean, like, therapy in general has its own ethical issues. You add someone being inebriated on a drug to that mix, and I'm sure you can imagine that.
Right. Even when I did the ketamine trips, like, we had to have a person in the room, like another like observer. So my mom, poor mom, she was like, what is ketamine? But I had to explain it to her and describe to her how it works, and she's been so supportive. So she'll be on the camera, and the therapist would have to make sure she's there. They'd have a conversation because ketamine makes you
it's
extremely dissociative. Yeah. So you look like you're asleep/dead. So she had to communicate with her to bring her in when needed, because she had to wake me up. And the way it also works is like you take it, and that one you specifically spit it out after 15 minutes, and it just dissolves into your mouth. Yeah. So to your point, like, we needed someone there, right? Because in therapy, and that was part of the ethics of doing CAP in that setting, we weren't allowed to do it without a chaperone, if you will.
Right. Yeah. So there's so many ethical issues. For sure.
So I guess on the flip side of hope, what excites you most about psychedelics and just the work in therapy, I guess, or just in general?
The potential.
Yeah.
The potential. I also feel like I'm talking about psychedelics with a lot of caution, because I think it deserves caution. And they're so fun. They're so much fun. Like, I still regularly take LSD and MDMA at times recreationally.
Okay. Is that part of like your therapeutic journey, or just more like a day-to-day, or?
No, honestly, at this point, it's to appreciate art. I think that is one thing that
I could see that
especially LSD, it enhances all of your senses, right? So something like listening to music, or you know, engaging in any form of art consumption becomes a completely different experience when you're tripping. Like, I remember actually one time I was with a friend who had never done LSD before, and she was taking it for the first time. I put on Malibu by Anderson .Paak, that album.
Yeah.
An album that she really likes.
Okay.
And she was like, is this a remastered version of the album? I didn't know that like this version existed. And I was like, no, you're just hearing it on LSD.
Yeah.
And it sounds like...
No, that's so true.
It sounds like the album too. You know, like the better...
The music really does come alive.
Yeah.
Like in those trips too, I was listening to like amazing soundtracks, and it felt like the music was, I don't know, the best word to describe it is alive, like alive with you. I
think that's very similar to the experience of LSD and psilocybin, is kind of like this sense of fluidity. Like the whole world feels like liquid. Yeah. And it's like all just moving around and ebbing and flowing, and everything that you're experiencing just kind of becomes a part of that like liquid. I even sometimes will have visuals like of the floor kind of like moving around like it's water, you know. Or I remember in particular one time like the carpet looked like there was like waves going through it, and I was like, oh my god, like there's waves in the carpet, you know. And I feel like music becomes a part of those like fluid motions, like everything feels like it has like an organic kind of aspect. I feel like there's also like a synesthesia element to it, where like music feels like it has like a shape, and the shapes like change, you know. And I don't necessarily like see that shape when I'm listening, but it's in my head. Like I can visualize like this music is this shape, and then like when the music changes, it's like the shape is changing and it's moving around in these different ways, and it's like I said, I think to someone who's never tried it before, it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. That sounds made up. Yeah. But I think if anybody's listening or watching who has taken psychedelics, they'll understand. They'll be like, oh yeah, I know.
So what would you say, I guess, as we're coming to the end of it, like for someone who's never tried it, like how would you, how would you recommend it, in what setting?
Yeah, I would say, again, set and setting are kind of is the saying in the community.
Important.
Set stands for mindset. So your mindset going into it. Like I said, I wouldn't recommend people to try psychedelics the way that I did, because I was not in a very good headspace at the time.
Okay.
And I also didn't know what I was really getting myself into. But also includes like, how much are you going to take? Like, do you understand the dosage? Do you understand the duration of effect? Do you understand, you know, what it might do?
Yep.
Do you understand, like, are you in a mindset where you can be open to things? You know, I think if you're in a very vulnerable state, it can go awry.
Yeah.
I won't say that it will. It always will.
But it can.
But it can.
Yeah.
So just to be more cautious around that. And then setting also, you know, who are you with? Where are you? Usually if I do these things, I'm at my house. So this is a place that I live, and I'm with people who I'm very close to, whom I trust very, very significantly. Like I know if anything goes wrong, like they will prioritize my well-being above everything else. And I think having somewhat realistic expectations that like, you know, I think if you go into it thinking like this is going to cure me of everything.
Yeah. How should they go into it? Like what is the benefits that you would say they could expect?
Yeah, I think you could probably expect a change in perspective.
Yeah.
How that perspective change is going to look and what perspective is going to change.
Up in the air.
That's up in the air. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But I know that definitely you will get a shift in your perspective. And I think especially with LSD and psilocybin, you can carry those with you throughout your life once you kind of have that like aha moment. With MDMA, I think set and setting also equally as important.
Yeah.
Again, like make sure you're with people that you trust.
Yeah.
Measure your dose, test your stuff. It matters for all of them. I think I specifically stress it with MDMA because you can overdose.
Right.
It does have addictive potential.
Yeah.
If you're buying it, you know, off of the street, you don't know what's in it. So you can buy test kits online, and they're really fun. You're squeezing little chemicals on it to see like what color changes, and that tells you like what substance is in it.
Interesting.
So it's like if you squeeze all of the different, you know, chemicals on them and the colors correspond to how MDMA should react, then you know you have MDMA.
Gotcha. Because you want to make sure it's actually what it says it is.
Right. Because anybody can give you anything and say it's anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So testing your stuff, benefits with MDMA, I mean, you'll feel amazing.
You'll feel great.
You'll feel great.
Maybe too great.
I've had friends who like took MDMA and were able to maybe share feelings with people that they might have otherwise been more afraid of sharing.
Yeah.
So you might feel more comfortable like saying things that you might not otherwise say.
Yeah.
So that's something to be cautious of as well, you know.
It could go either way for you. Yeah.
Right, it could go either way for you. You will feel more open. I think you can also expect to maybe have some kind of a perspective shift. I think it's not always necessarily true with MDMA, but it can definitely happen.
Yeah.
I've even, you know, taken MDMA with the intention to process traumatic memories.
Okay.
Just like on my own or with a friend.
Sure.
And we're just, you know, going back and forth with each other as people that we trust. And I think I experienced that sense of like, oh, wow, normally if I thought about this, it would make me so upset. But right now, like I can just talk about it. Like it's a thing that happened and it's fine. Right. It's just a thing that happened.
And that's a part of it where you can revisit something traumatic or like what would, if you were sober, completely take you to out of your window. But within psychedelics, like you can revisit that and still be in the experience of it.
Right, with MDMA.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I kind of, that's what I experienced with ketamine too.
Yeah.
Like I was revisiting things, but I wasn't as, I guess, charged or triggered, like you're saying.
Yeah, I guess I know less about ketamine experientially. Like I have tried it before, but my experiences were kind of after I had done a lot of work. So it was more just like I guess we'll see what this is about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I felt the presence that
you felt the presence,
about.
Right? Yeah. It's like this, I don't know, it's like a huge shift from my real day to day.
I remember the day after, like it knocked me out. I fell asleep. I felt amazing. I woke up the next morning and it felt like my entire being had been like rejuvenated. Yeah. And I was like, whoa.
And I wish I could, like you were saying, capture that feeling forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that you feel like you didn't get to mention that you want to on this topic with psychedelics and therapy?
There's just so much potential. I think there's so much misinformation and I think that does a disservice.
Yeah.
So I think I encourage people who are interested, do your research.
Yeah.
Read up about, you know, what these chemicals are and how they impact you.
Yeah.
And also know that everybody reacts to them differently. And specifically LSD and shrooms, everybody kind of has a different response to them. So one person's experience might not match yours exactly.
Right.
But there's things that are pretty consistent that always happen. So, you know, be open.
Be open.
And just, I think if you can go with the flow and just allow whatever's happening to happen, I think the more you resist when you're tripping, the more you can fall into the anxiety and paranoia and those like kind of loops where you get stuck and you're afraid and then you have ego death. I think a lot of that happens from resisting the experience.
Gotcha.
So if you can just accept that like this is what's happening and it's okay and I'm safe and nothing bad's going to happen to me.
Okay.
And sometimes people get so out of it that they even forgot that they took a drug, you know? Like you forgot that you've taken something and that's why you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
You might even be like, I guess this is just how I am now, you know? So having something to remind yourself like what's going on and staying grounded in, you know, where you are, because you can get lost.
Gotcha.
So having grounding things.
Yeah. So setting,
right.
Being open. And I think what you landed on is like the potential that this could have on giving people either new experiences, new perspectives, or again, like we said in the beginning, changing those neural pathways to build new connections, because that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So thank you so much for this whole entire thing. Loved it. It was so helpful. So thank you. And hopefully to everyone listening, you guys were able to pick up something on psychedelics that you might not have heard of, or you do your own research and you look into each of these individually and see if that makes sense for you. And especially within like a therapy setting. Thank you, Sajl.
Yeah, of course.